So, I want to talk about the Rings of Power. Specifically, I want to talk about why. Just why.
Why?
While the show isn't terrible in every single way, it certainly tries its best to hit every major beat of awfulness.
Name is Dr.
Though, only a few episodes have aired at the time that I wrote this, so there's plenty of time for it to spiral ever further down to the depths of Moria.
So it's bad.
To start, you should click those like and subscribe buttons to help stop Amazon from taking over the world. But also, to throw Rings of Power some positive feedback, I will say that the overall set design and art design are passable. Sometimes it even looks well designed. But much of it, while well styled, comes across as small and somewhat claustrophobic. In the worst cases, many of the sets have a very CGI look to them, and much of the CGI leaves a lot to be desired. The daytime lighting and camera shots work quite well, while the dark scenes are painfully dark on most screens. Costuming clearly benefited from that $180 million budget, but suffers from the too new appearance, which looks like the world doesn't exist, isn't lived in, except for when it's on screen. Though the Anatar costume and wig are one horrific disaster to rule them all. In essence, every set looks very much like a set, and everyone looks like they're actors on that set. Not a glowing set of positives, but hey, it's something.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Before moving on to the meat of this video, I want to clarify that I like to use villains as a litmus test for storytelling. In part because I generally prefer darker aesthetics, but also I find villains to be a clear indicator of what the writer expects their heroes to be and where their story will go. In my last video, I covered Marvel's villains to outline Marvel's flaws in its current state, so if you're curious, you can check that out. For this video, I want to highlight Sauron as a character and if and how that reflects on our protagonists. As I identified a handful of pros, we shall dip our toes into the vast sea of cons. Like Sauron being reduced to a petty con man.
Con man, a grifter.
At the end of season 1, we see that our painfully stoic protagonist had basically persuaded Halbrand into hanging out with her for an entire season, only for Off-Brand to be revealed as the Dark Lord Sauron.
Of course, the Dark Lord.
In the second season, we learn that prior to the events of the first season, Sauron had been acting as a political candidate, vying for the orcs to elect him as Supreme Orc Chancellor, or Senator, or King, or Club President, or something. I don't know.
I am the Senate.
After winning his royal election, Sauron is somehow murdered with his own new crown by Amazon fanfic villain Adar, King of Uruks and Eczema. Without diving much further into specifics of the plot, in short, Sauron survives as black goo and uses his anime Ice Blast attack, dramatically covering the tower in ice to help cover his escape. I mean, I think that's why he did it. It didn't make a lot of sense.
I'm not dead.
Which effectively killed no one. It killed no one.
It didn't work.
Now, why does this matter? Aside from the nonsensical beats that make up this plot, this writing has made his character impotent and at the mercy of the world around him, a victim of circumstance.
I'm the victim here.
Furthermore, it has created a villain that does not match up with the Silmarillion lore or the depiction of Sauron in the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. Which is important, because even if you wish to disregard the Silmarillion as obscure Tolkien lore, the original trilogy sits well beloved in the hearts of fantasy fans of all ages throughout the world. It is the audience's point of reference for all things Lord of the Rings, hence the name. Sauron was written as a Luciferian character.
Everything is the devil to you, mama!
And in the original trilogy, he's more of an enigmatic threat rather than a fleshed out character, which greatly inflates his sense of mystery and menace. Granted, this show seeks to bring the character of Sauron to life. The problem lies in that the writers created an idea of what villain they wanted in the show then threw a Sauron-colored coat of paint on top and called it a day. So they're basically shady used car salesmen? Sorry, salespersons. Salespeople? Whatever. Sauron is an angel fallen from grace. With that, he remains an angel. The angels of Tolkien's legendarium, known as the Maiar and Valar, are the most powerful beings ever to exist. In Rings of Power, I can't help but wonder why such an all-powerful genie would need to appease and score political points with his orc lessers, let alone be caught blindsided and, quote, murdered by them. For some reason, the show depicts orcs as misunderstood, oppressed, wannabe pacifists, rather than the man-eating, bloodthirsty monstrosities that Morgoth and Sauron had made them to be. My guess is that they're supposed to be a modernist revision, but I'll let you decide. The show has implied that Sauron is supposed to be a near omnipotent force of evil. But it just acts like he isn't a near omnipotent force of evil when it's convenient for the writers. Yet the show uses his perceived ultimate villainy as a MacGuffin to drive the plot forward rather than substantiating it as a real plot device. Concisely, Sauron only functions as a big bad in theory. That he's a master manipulator pulling the strings of those around him, but in practice, he's little more than an opportunist who only succeeds due to plot contrivances. If you want your audience to be unconvinced of your villain's grandeur and terror, I can't think of a better way to do it. Speaking of plot contrivances, Sauron's primarily stem from the odd choices of a plank of wood named Galadriel, who we shall call Plank. The biggest offense, which is magnificently atrocious, is the failure of Plank, Redneck Elrond, and Elf King Gil-galad in telling Celebrimbor of Halbrand's true identity. Initially, Plank does the worst thing possible by hiding his identity as, the ultimate enemy of the elves in Middle-earth.
He's back.
She settles on warning Kelly and Almond with the "I don't want you hanging out with him anymore" shtick, as if that's persuasive enough reasoning for kids to not hang out. And why, you might ask? Presumably she was embarrassed that she let her nether regions do her thinking for her.
That Hansel's so hot right now.
As one might expect, Zeli Dimdor does the dimmest thing a door can do and lets the bad guy in because Sauron, or Halbrand, stands romantically out in the rain with his boombox playing love songs from the 80s. After Hillbilly Almond and Dildo Lad pressure her to reveal who Off-Brand is, they conclude that it is sufficient to send Kelly Dimdor a letter via the Pony Express to inform him of this most critical and dire information. So, consequently, after Plank uncovers Sauron's identity, he heads to Mordor because I assume he was bored from watching his own TV show, only to return to Eregion assuming or hoping that Plank had kept his name a secret in the first place. And it works. Talk about plot contrivances.
Lucky.
It also turns out that the Anatar alias is only for Kelly's benefit, as anyone who has seen Off-Brand would easily recognize him anyway. Strongly note that Sauron is supposed to be a very capable shapeshifter. He could have literally turned into anyone, not excluding werewolves, vampires, elves, men, and so on. So as long as anyone who knows anything stays away from Eregion, Sauron will be able to act unimpeded. Kelly Dimdor counts on no one arriving before his Pony Express letter of lies reaches King Dildolad, claiming he is closing his forge.
You sit on a throne of lies.
Further, the writers lower the bar for both the audience and protagonists alike.
But clearly something else has lowered the bar even more!
For fans of the original lore, this is a tragedy of epic proportions, and I'm positive you can feel the earth shake near Tolkien's grave as he spins around like an Australian breakdancer. So, to the heart of this video, why Amazon? Just why? Who exactly is this made for? Aside from some decent visuals and okay Peter Jackson-esque aesthetics, Rings of Power fails to hold up to any scrutiny or application of logic. Character agency is non-existent, as they are required to be morons for the plot to progress. As a result, Fans of The Lord of the Rings aren't going to recognize these characters or plot tie-ins to the original trilogy. Fans of The Silmarillion will likely vomit in a back alley somewhere. Casual viewers might be less appalled by Amazon's storytelling, but it's so boring, contrived, and predictable that continuing to hold their attention will be a struggle. It appears the real power struggle in Rings of Power is to keep the audience from looking at their phone or wandering off like a disinterested child.
Sometimes we get stuck in our own little world. And then in that world, we make even littler worlds.
It's so wrapped up in telling the story the writers want to tell that the fact that it's based on Lord of the Rings is effectively nothing more than nostalgia bait. This show is so aggressively mediocre and fan-fiction-y
Juvenile, tuneless, mediocre, and horrible.
that you could easily replace some nouns, use some different shaped objects as MacGuffins, and the story would be entirely unrecognizable from anything Tolkien wrote. Moreover, the acting is largely subpar with atrocious, nonsensical dialogue.
No one can give you a name. It is yours already.
That's not how names work, my guy. I also found the amount of exaggerated breathy R rolls to be exhausting. And yes, I know it's part of their accent, but still, maybe that's just me. Anyway, their characters are far from endearing or compelling. I doubt I'd notice or care if all of them dropped dead at once. The subplots are so forgettable and meandering that I need to remind myself that not Gandalf and the not hobbits are even part of the series. The dwarf story continually comes up short with equally small amount of relevance, setting up for the creation of the 7 dwarf lord rings. And I still don't care. The corrupting power of the 3 elven rings is an abomination to the lore. It's worth noting that these first few episodes are far more palatable than the first season. Less not hobbits certainly helps. At its core, Rings of Power is the power of plot idiocy. Perhaps that's who the show is made for. And by.
They're all idiots!
Well, that'll be all for now. I've barely touched the surface of this scummy pond water of a show. Oh no! But I feel I've illustrated my disappointment well enough. So what do you think? Did it give Sauron a fair shake? Is Galadriel ever going to learn to emote? Or if you'd like to see more after the season finale, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you in the next one.